One of the most common questions that I get when working with business leaders is, how do I cope with the pace of life in modern times? With all this technology, I've got a iPhone or a BlackBerry attached to my hip. By the time I get to work in the morning, I have, people say anywhere from 20 to 2,000 emails. Everybody has too many emails, and everyone feels like a slave to their phone. So I hear that a lot. And what's the hardest thing for people to see is that it's a human being running that technology. It's not a technology running a human being. And most people feel like technology is running them, like they're sort of victim to it. One company I worked in called them crackberries because there was the idea that the BlackBerry was so addictive that people were obsessed with it like an addict would be with crack. So you can see how unhealthy the relationship people have in their thinking to technology can become and has become for many, many, many people in the business world and outside of it. So I want to talk just for a few moments because I think it's really helpful for people to understand more clearly what I'm suggesting about it's a person running a technology, not a technology running a person. So pace is something that comes from an individual's state of mind. The pace of life is actually a reflection of the pace of thought in a person's head. And it's very hard for people to see because of the way that thinking merges so seamlessly with our consciousness to make it look like it's happening in the world out there. So most of us, when our heads get running, vroom, 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 and we're darting around, it seems like, oh my gosh, the pace of the world is overwhelming. But what's really helpful to consider is that as a human being, you can only experience the pace of one thing and one thing only, and that's your mind. That's your speed of thought, if you will. So a lot of people don't appreciate that as you step on the pedal in your own head, in your own thought system, it's harder and harder to keep up with the world out there. But we blame the world out there as if it's the one revving the mind up. It's a very tricky thing to see, but I encourage people to play with it because you notice that as your state of mind clears, as you have less on your mind, less buzzing around in your head, you notice that time starts to feel nicer, like you have more of it. It feels more spacious. Athletes often talk about this. Again, I love to give athletes as an example because it gives you a very clear snapshot of how state of mind affects a person's perception of reality. But athletes talk about when they really get into a groove or fall into the zone like they talk about, it suddenly seems like time expands or slows down. And so while they're, doing something very fast, like perhaps chasing a hockey puck around the ice rink, they're doing it in a feeling of having all the time in the world. And we all have that capacity that when we become very present and we're not extremely distracted, we don't feel like we're chasing things in the world to try to get them done. It really shows you that actually presence of mind suddenly makes the world out there look manageable, look peaceful, and it feels like time has expanded. So I feel like technology has become an easy scapegoat, an easy finger to point at why we all feel victimized by the current pace of life. And I challenge people to step back and consider that actually busyness has become a glorified way of life, and busyness is coming from the mind of the person being busy. And it's easy to say, well, computers did that to me, my emails do that to me, my iPhone permanently in my pocket does that to me. But there are people that have emails and have iPhones and all of that stuff that don't feel that way because the pace of their mind is quieter, it's more present. And I know that it's really tempting for people to say, yeah, but in my job. And the second you have a yeah, but, again, you limit the potential of the mind. You miss that this is what's steering the ship out there, not the other way around. So it's really wonderfully freeing if people can start to play with how much does my own state of mind have to do with how victimized I feel by the technology I engage in. Because I can guarantee you from experience of my own life and from working with clients that as people's pace of mind slows down, those things look much easier to navigate with a sense of free will and a sense of, oh yeah, this is me picking up my phone all the time. This is me experiencing these emails this way. And when you change, you'll see that the world changes. Yeah, and I actually noticed for myself personally recently how much I had become sort of oblivious to how much the pace of my own mind was making me respond somewhat addictively to my technology. So I had the amazing opportunity to go to Colombia for a couple of weeks. So the country Colombia. And so I was in the mountains with no Wi-Fi reception, no cell phone. So I was really technology-less for a solid 2-week period. And it was really fascinating to me. First of all, it was lovely. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, but I've never considered myself someone who, walks around kind of complaining about the pace of life and the need to be on technology all the time. It's not something that has been a concern in my life, but it was really clear to me when I came back from that trip, because my head was quite quiet and I hadn't been engaging in technology for 2 weeks. I really noticed when I came back to New York City how much, particularly when I would be leaving the subway, so walking upstairs onto the street from the subway, I noticed that almost every single person would be getting out their phone right as they were going up to street level, because that's right when, you get signal again. And it was amazing to me how much it looked like completely people asleep. Like they looked like robots. They didn't even know they were doing it in a way. And it was funny because after about a week of being at home, I recognized that I was starting to do the same thing. I was like, hey, wait a second. I'm becoming one of the robots. And it was really fascinating because what I got to see was how much we justify whatever our habit becomes. So it was so tempting for me to say, oh, well, it's because I got to check and see if I got an email back about that, or I need to call so-and-so. Even though my workday was over, I was on my way home, I had a justification for the revving in my head that was starting to happen again after a week back. And I realized, oh, wow, I'm creating a reason for this pace to resume itself. I don't want to do that. That's not helpful. That then just makes me asleep at the wheel. I become one of the robots. And I really saw that I am absolutely capable of getting what I need to get done within a normal work day. And a lot of what I feel compelled to do is just because I become a little bit asleep about a habit of justifying and a need to keep engaging with these things. And it was really helpful for me to see myself doing that. And that's all I want people to consider is it's coming from you. And if you become aware of kind of how your habits of thinking are dictating how you experience this, you'll have a lot more say in the matter than you do if you're not paying attention to your mind at all.